My name's Ethan Cole. I'm 41 years old. And 3 months ago, I thought I had the kind of marriage other men envied. Turns out, I was living in a story she'd already rewritten without me in it. For most of my adult life, I believed in stability. I believed that if you worked hard, paid the bills on time, kept your promises, and loved your family, things would turn out the way they were supposed to. That's what my father taught me. That's what I built my life around. And for 14 years, it looked like I was right. My wife, Lena, worked in human resources for a tech firm in Colorado Springs. She was smart, charming, the kind of woman who could talk anyone into anything. People liked her instantly. And I like to think that I was the lucky one, the steady husband who kept things running while she lit up the room. We had 2 kids, Jake, 15, and Emma, 10. Jake's the kind of kid who keeps his head down, quiet, focused. Emma's pure sunlight. She'll talk your ear off about her art projects, her friends, her cat, anything. Our house wasn't perfect, but it was home. Or at least, it used to be. It started small. The way these things usually do. Lena began working late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. At first, I didn't think much of it. Her job was demanding. Her company always rolling out some new project or diversity initiative that required after-hours meetings. But then I noticed she started dressing differently. Sharper, more deliberate. Perfume I didn't recognize. Makeup applied with a kind of care that wasn't for me. There were new passwords on her phone. A habit of turning the screen face down when I walked by. Little things that, on their own, didn't mean much. But together, they formed a pattern, and patterns don't lie. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. She'd been stressed. We'd both been busy. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into things. That's what I wanted to believe. But one night, something shifted. It was a Thursday. Late October. I was in my home office, half buried under spreadsheets and coffee mugs, when I heard her laugh. Now, if you've ever been married long enough, you know that your spouse has different kinds of laughter. There's the polite one for coworkers, the tired one after a long day. And then there's the rare one, the one that sounds young again. The one that used to belong to you. That's the laugh I heard. It floated down the hallway, light and teasing. The kind of sound that makes a man stop whatever he's doing. I got up, quietly, and followed the sound to the kitchen. Lena was leaning against the counter, phone pressed to her ear, twirling a piece of hair the way she used to when we were dating. She was smiling softly, almost shyly, and I realized I hadn't seen that version of her in years. She whispered, "Stop it, you're terrible," and giggled again. Then she said, "What if Ethan hears you? My name." My name spoken like an obstacle. Like something in the way. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching a woman I thought I knew better than anyone turn into a stranger right in front of me. She hung up a minute later, humming to herself as she rinsed her wine glass, completely unaware that something inside me had cracked open and would never quite close again. That night, she went to bed early, claiming she was exhausted from work. I stayed downstairs, staring at nothing, and for the first time in 14 years, the house that I built, the life that I built, didn't feel like mine anymore. Something was wrong. And deep down, I already knew exactly what it was. The next morning, everything looked normal. Coffee brewing, kids arguing over cereal, the same sunlight spilling across the kitchen table. But once you've seen a crack, you can't unsee it. Every laugh. Every text. Every moment of silence after that felt heavier. Like I was living in a house with a broken window, pretending not to feel the cold air creeping in. Lena was different now. In ways only a husband would notice. She started humming when she texted. She wore that same perfume, even on lazy Sundays. And she guarded her phone like it contained the nuclear codes. She used to leave it on the counter when she showered. Now, it never left her side. I told myself not to look, that checking her phone would make me the bad guy. But I also knew that good men stay blind longer than they should, and I wasn't going to be that man anymore. A week later, she forgot her laptop bag in the car. It was early morning. Frost on the windshield. And I remember thinking, if I look, there's no going back. But I opened it anyway. Her laptop was password protected. But Lena's been using the same password for years. Our anniversary. I typed it in, half hoping it wouldn't work. It did. At first, everything looked innocent. HR reports, company updates, boring corporate files. Then I found a folder buried in her inbox called Travel. Inside were email threads with a man named Blake Warren, corporate consultant, Denver-based, married. If his signature line was anything to trust, the first few emails were harmless scheduling meetings, feedback notes, little jokes about clients. But as I scrolled down, the tone changed. Thanks, Fadina. I haven't laughed that hard in months. Then another, you make Mondays bearable. And then one that stopped me cold. I can't stop thinking about last night. That line didn't just break my heart, it erased it. I read it again. Slower? Like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. They didn't. The emails kept going, late-night exchanges. Hidden rendezvous. A digital love story built on my blind trust. She told him things she used to tell me. How tired she was. How unappreciated she felt. How he made her feel seen. That word. Seen. As if the last 14 years of my life had been invisible. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Part of me wanted to smash the screen. Confront her right then. But another part, the colder, quieter part, knew that anger wouldn't save me. It would only warn her, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I started saving everything. I printed every message, every photo attachment, every good morning. Beautiful, and last night was amazing. I made copies and hid them in the small fireproof safe in my office. It felt dirty. It felt wrong. But betrayal doesn't leave you many clean options. That night, she came home with takeout and a smile. She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. And for the first time, I didn't kiss her back. I just watched her. The woman sitting across from me wasn't my wife anymore. She was an actress playing the role of one, perfectly rehearsed, hitting all her marks. She asked about my day, about the kids, about dinner plans for the weekend. Her words were the same, but her eyes, they'd already left. I excused myself, went to my office, and stared at those printed pages again. 15 years of loyalty, erased by a few dozen lines of text, and a man named Blake. But I didn't yell. He didn't cry. I didn't explode. I planned, because if she could write a new story behind my back, then I was going to make damn sure I controlled how it ended. It was a Thursday night, the kind of night when the air outside feels heavy, like it knows something's about to break. Lena came home late again. Her heels clicked across the hardwood like a metronome, counting down to something inevitable. She smelled like wine. Not the kind we kept at home, the kind that costs more than I'd ever spend on dinner for two. And underneath it, a faint trace of cologne that didn't belong to me. She dropped her purse on the counter and smiled. Casual. Tired. Pretending. Long day, she said. Yeah, I replied. For both of us. She didn't catch the tone right away. She started talking about work, some office thing, some meaningless story. And then I said, quietly, how's Blake? Her hand froze halfway to her glass. She blinked. Once. Like she'd misheard me. What I asked how Blake Warren's doing. Your travel consultant. The one who can't stop thinking about last night. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Too quickly. You do. I said, and you're going to stop lying to me now. For a moment. Silence. Then she laughed. But it wasn't amusement. It was panic, dressed up as confidence. You went through my things, I went through our things. I said, because I still thought we were in us. Herr Eis Harden. That's an invasion of privacy. So is sneaking around with another man, while your husband raises your kids. The smile disappeared. Her lips trembled, just enough to betray the act. You're overreacting. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She opened her mouth, searching for a lie that would fit. Then the act collapsed. Yes, she said finally, her voice breaking. I met someone. It was almost a relief to hear her say it out loud. The truth had been sitting in the room for weeks, and now it finally had a voice. We were unhappy, she said, her voice growing sharper. Defensive. You don't listen anymore. You're always busy. Always tired. You don't even look at me the way you used to. I took a slow breath. I was listening the whole time. I said, you were just talking to someone else. That line hit her harder than anything I could have shouted. She looked away, biting her lip, eyes wet. But then came the second wind, the defiance. The part where guilt turns into justification. I deserve to be happy. Ethan, you can't expect me to stay in a marriage that doesn't make me feel alive. I stared at her for a long moment. You don't burn your house down and call it freedom. That silenced her. For a few seconds, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the low ticking of the clock above the stove. Finally, she whispered, maybe we should just end this. Maybe we should. I said, but not the way you think. She looked confused, like she expected a fight and didn't know what to do without one. Then she said it, the line I knew was coming. I want a divorce. There it was. The word she'd been carrying in her mouth for weeks. Waiting for a moment she thought she could control. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. I just nodded. Then you should start packing, I said quietly. Because I won't live with someone who looks at me like a mistake. She stared at me for a long time. Maybe trying to find some trace of the man who used to forgive her too easily. But that man was gone. Without another word, she went upstairs. I heard drawers open. The zipper of a small suitcase. The quiet rustle of clothes being folded in guilt. Our kids' bedroom door creaked open. I knew they were listening. Their mother leaving. Their father silent. A whole family breaking apart in whispers. When she came back down, she didn't look at me. Just said, I'll stay at my sister's for a while. I nodded. The front door closed behind her. And the house exhaled a long, empty breath that sounded like the end of something. I sat down at the table, surrounded by everything she'd left behind. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't the only one who'd been pretending. I had, too. Pretending we were fine. Pretending she still loved me. Pretending the truth hadn't already moved out long before she did. The next morning, the house felt hollow. Not quiet hollow. Like sound didn't belong there anymore. The kids knew something was off before I even said a word. Jake sat at the table scrolling his phone, pretending not to notice the missing car in the driveway. Emma kept asking when Mom would wake up. Even though she already knew the answer, I poured cereal, packed lunches, went through the motions. That's what fathers do when the world breaks. They keep the small things moving. When Jake finally looked up, his face was calm. Too calm. He said, "She left, didn't she?" I nodded. "She needs some time." I told him, "Just a little space to think." He didn't say anything for a while. Then, without looking up, he said, "So she picked him over us." He didn't cry. He didn't even look angry. And that hurt more than anything Lena had ever said. Because when your kid stops feeling, that's when you know the damage has already sunk in deep. That night, after they went to bed, I sat in my office staring at the printed emails again. Every word felt heavier now. The flirtation, the longing, the plans, all written by a woman who once promised to love me until the end. I opened my laptop and searched the name Blake Warren. It didn't take long. He wasn't exactly subtle. Public LinkedIn profile. Corporate consultant out of Denver. And there it was, his family photo. A wife. 2 young boys. Matching Christmas sweaters. I stared at that picture for a long time. That's the part most people don't talk about. It's not just the betrayal, it's the absurdity of realizing how ordinary the person is who wrecked your life. He wasn't special. He wasn't some charming stranger from a movie. He was just another bored man lying to his family the same way my wife had lied to me. I found his wife's name in the photo tag Allison Warren. Curiosity turned into something sharper. I looked her up on Facebook, half expecting a private profile. But it wasn't. There she was, vacation pictures. Birthday cakes. The kind of normal life that now felt foreign to me. It took me 2 days to write the message. I deleted it and rewrote it more times than I can count. When I finally hit send, it said, "Hey Allison, I think our spouses are having an affair. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you." She replied 3 hours later. Short. Polite. Restrained. I already suspected. "Do you have proof I did?" I sent her screenshots. She thanked me. And that was it, at least for that night. The next morning, she called. Her voice was steady. Professional. The kind of tone you use when you've cried too much to cry anymore. She said, "I guess now we both know the truth." I said, "Yeah, guess we do." There was a long silence. The kind that stretches between 2 people who never wanted to meet but share the same wound. She told me she'd been noticing changes. 2 late nights. New excuses. Funny how lies always follow the same script. Different actors. Same dialogue. Over the next week, we talked a few times. Not like conspirators. More like survivors comparing notes from the same crash. There was something oddly grounding about it. She didn't talk about revenge. She talked about her kids. About how to tell them. How to hold the line without losing herself. She sent me a message one night that stuck with me. She said, "I'm not crying anymore. I'm planning." That's when I realized she wasn't like most people. Allison wasn't the kind of woman who broke quietly. She was the kind who rebuilt with precision. I found myself respecting her. Not out of attraction. Not out of shared misery. But out of admiration for her composure in the middle of chaos. She'd been hit by the same storm I had. But instead of drowning, she was already charting a course through it. One evening, after another long talk, I asked, "What are you going to do now?" Her voice didn't waver. "I'm going to make sure they understand what they've done. Not just to us, but to everyone they lied to." I didn't say it out loud. But I felt the same way. For weeks, I'd been surviving in silence. Playing the role of the calm father. The reasonable man. But now there was a flicker of something else. Purpose. I looked at the folder of evidence in my safe and thought about what she'd said. Not crying. Planning. And for the first time since it all began, I felt that quiet burn inside, the kind that doesn't want to destroy, but to balance the scales, because Allison wasn't the kind of woman who cried and moved on. She was the kind who made things right. And I was done being the man who just let things happen. Revenge has a rhythm. It starts as noise rage, heartbreak, disbelief. But if you sit with it long enough, the noise fades. What's left is precision. Allison and I didn't plan to form an alliance. It just happened. Two people who had been living in parallel lies, suddenly standing on the same side of the truth. We weren't friends. Not really. We were partners in the quiet pursuit of justice. We began with the evidence. Emails, text logs, credit card receipts, hotel bookings, timestamps, pieces of a puzzle they thought no one would ever see. Allison was meticulous. She had access to Blake's business calendar and travel reimbursements. She could track every conference and training session he'd claimed to attend. I had Lena's emails and card statements. Together, it was a perfect match, their secret life mapped out in black and white. We traded screenshots and timelines like detectives, comparing notes after a long stakeout. Each message confirmed what we already knew. But there was satisfaction in seeing the pattern laid bare. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about accountability. For days, we worked quietly. No outbursts. No confrontations. No threats. That was the mistake. They both expected the emotional explosion that would make us look unhinged while they played the victims. We weren't giving them that satisfaction. We were going to do something far worse. We were going to let them fall on their own sword. There was an annual corporate retreat coming up in 2 weeks. A 3-day event hosted by the company Lena and Blake both worked for, executives, HR teams, and their families. Everyone who mattered would be there. A place built on image, on reputation, on pretending everything was fine. Allison called me the night she found out. Her voice was calm, steady. Lena and Blake will both be at the retreat. She said, I know. I replied, they always go. Then that's where it ends. How she paused. Then said, you don't have to ruin them. Just let them ruin themselves in front of everyone. It was a simple plan. Elegant even. No shouting. No confrontations. No chanis. Just truth, delivered to the right people at the right time. Allison drafted an anonymous email with attached proof screenshots of messages, hotel receipts, and a few particularly damning lines that left no room for doubt. She scheduled it to be sent to the company's HR department, the board, and a few well-connected spouses during the retreat's second day, right when everyone would be gathered together. Meanwhile, I gathered the rest of my documentation and created a timeline of transactions tied to our joint credit card, the same one Lena had used for her work dinners and overnight trips. I didn't send it anywhere. Not yet. But it was ready. Truth. Armed and waiting. In those 2 weeks, I didn't talk to Lena much. She called the house a few times, checked in with the kids, tried to sound normal. But every time I heard her voice, it felt like listening to a stranger, borrowing my wife's tone. I answered politely, said the right things, played the part she expected, because if she could pretend, so could I. The night before the retreat, Allison and I met in person for the first time. A quiet coffee shop halfway between Colorado Springs and Denver. No dramatics. No bitterness. Just two tired people who'd run out of illusions. She slid a flash drive across the table. This has everything, she said. Everything. Every message. every call log, every receipt that ties them together. I nodded. She took a slow breath, then added, "Tomorrow, their world gets small." I asked her if she ever thought about just letting it go. She smiled. Not kindly. Letting go is what got us here. There was something about that line that stuck with me. Letting go. The phrase people use to sound wise when they're really just afraid of confrontation. But letting go doesn't heal you. Sometimes, you have to drag the truth into the light and watch it burn. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how easily they'd built their fantasy on top of our lives. Every lie. Every secret meeting, it all came at the expense of the people who loved them most. Tomorrow, all of that would come to an end. And the beauty of it was, I wouldn't have to lift a finger. They'd written their own downfall. We were just setting the stage. By morning, the emails would send themselves, the evidence would circulate, and every whisper would become a shout. All Allison and I had to do was wait, because revenge doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes, it comes from silence. And in that silence, the truth does what it was always meant to do. It destroys the lie. Saturday morning came bright and quiet. Colorado air. Crisp and cold, the kind that makes everything feel sharper, clearer. Somewhere a few hundred miles away, Lena and Blake were smiling for name tags, shaking hands, pretending their world was still intact. I didn't go. I didn't have to. Allison and I had already set everything in motion. At 10:15 a.m., the first email was sent. By 10:18, the screenshots were sitting in the company's group chat, forwarded again and again by people who couldn't look away. By 10:20, HR had the receipts, the hotel invoices, the messages that left no room for denial. And by 10:25, the silence began. No screaming, no fighting, just silence, and then the sound of reputations collapsing. I've been told it started small. A few confused faces staring down at their phones. Then glances. Whispers. Heads turning. And then Lena's name came up again and again. Her laugh. The one that used to sound like sunlight. Gone. Blake tried to talk his way through it. But Allison was there. And she wasn't whispering. She walked straight up to him in front of his coworkers. His boss? His wife still wearing the same wedding ring he'd betrayed. No yelling. Just facts. She showed him the photos, the messages, the truth he'd buried under every lie. And Lena, I heard she tried to act surprised when HR pulled her aside. Tried to smile. Tried to charm. Tried to spin it into misunderstanding. But you can't charm your way out of the truth. Not when everyone can see it. By noon, both of them were gone, escorted out quietly. Two people who thought the world revolved around their secret, suddenly realizing the orbit had stopped. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't gloat. I just sat at home, drinking coffee, while the notifications rolled in, and thought about how something so small, a few words, a few lies, could end entire lives. They built their fantasy on lies. I just turned on the lights, and when the truth filled the room, they finally saw what I'd seen all along, the wreckage they'd made of their own story. Justice didn't need noise. It just needed time. In the weeks that followed, silence became my closest ally. No arguments. No pleading texts. No late-night calls. Just the slow, steady unraveling of everything she'd built on deception. The company let Lena go within days. Officially, it was for breach of conduct. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. Blake's marriage collapsed soon after. His career burned to ash right beside hers. When the divorce papers came, She didn't fight them at first. But when she realized I'd filed for full custody, the calls began. The tears, the apologies, the desperate promises to fix what's left. She showed up at my door one evening. Eyes red. Voice trembling. Imate amistake. She said, I want to come home. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. You're not sorry for what you did. I said quietly. You're sorry, because the lie stopped working. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. But he didn't move. The part of me that used to ache for her was gone, replaced by something steadier. Greater clarity. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I was protecting peace. When the divorce was finalized, I gained full custody of Jake and Emma. The judge said I'd shown restraint, responsibility, dignity. But it wasn't about winning. It was about stopping the damage before it reached them. And as she walked out of the courtroom, alone and small, I didn't feel triumph, just relief. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it simply whispers. Enough. Months passed. The seasons shifted. The chaos faded. And our house slowly began to feel like a home again. Jake started laughing more. Emma began singing while she drew in the living room again. The air felt lighter, like we'd opened every window and let the ghosts leave. We had a new ritual. Saturday mornings at the diner down the road. Pancakes. Black coffee. Laughter, the kind that comes from somewhere real. One morning, Jake looked up from his plate and said, You seem different. Dad. I smiled. Yeah, I guess I am. He nodded, like he understood more than a 15-year-old should. The truth is, I'd stopped replaying the past in my head. Stopped trying to understand why she did it. Why I didn't see it sooner. Why love sometimes turns into something unrecognizable. None of that mattered anymore. The house was quiet now, but not empty. Just peaceful. No secrets. No pretending. No walking on eggshells. Sometimes losing what you thought you needed is the only way to find what you actually deserve. I looked at my kids across the booth. Both of them smiling. Both of them healing. And I realized that maybe this calm, this honesty was what happiness really looked like. She chose a lie. I chose peace. And that's the difference between escaping something and outgrowing it. If you've ever been betrayed but found the strength to stand again, this story was for you. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of truth and consequence. And remember, peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect.